I shoved the Cardassian punk kid against the classroom wall and sneered. Looks can be deceiving. You think us humans are weak? Well, buckle up, Buttercup, 'cause I'm about to prove your scaled ass dead wrong. I released my grip, and he slumped into his chair, a mix of fear, anger, and grudging respect flickering across his reptilian face. Whispers rippled through the lecture hall as I strode to the podium, my heavy boots echoing on the polished floor. My name is James Rice, and I'm a down-on-his-luck human engineer, a grizzled veteran pushing 50. Last week, I was about ready to end it all after losing my job, my wife and my dog. But then this fancy Cardassian school offered me a gig as a substitute teacher for their snot-nosed alien brats. I figured, what the hell, might as well take a shot at this educating thing before I punch my own ticket for good. So here I am on planet Cardassia Prime, ready to blow these arrogant pricks' minds with some stone-cold knowledge about humanity's tech prowess. From the moment I walked in, I could tell what they thought of me. 200 sets of beady eyes stared me down, smug smirks plastered on their faces. They've been taught all their lives that humans are feeble, primitive creatures, that we're too dumb and disorganized to ever challenge the mighty Cardassian Union. Well, my job is to set these little shits straight, and I ain't leaving till I do, 'cause if humanity can't prove our worth to the galaxy, we're all royally screwed. It's do or die time, and I'm the poor bastard they picked to get it done. Buckle up, kiddos. Professor Rice is about to drop some knowledge that'll shatter every dumbass lie your mum has ever told you about the human race. As the weeks dragged on, I kept chipping away at the Cardassians' thick skulls, determined to reshape their narrow views on human ingenuity. One day I hauled a pile of scrap metal and circuits into the classroom, dumping it unceremoniously on my desk. The students eyed the junk dubiously, muttering amongst themselves. I grinned, holding up a twisted piece of metal. Today you're going to learn about jury rigging. It's the ancient human art of making something out of nothing, using whatever crap you got lying around. I then cobbled together a crude but functional comm device, much to their amazement. Varys lingered after class, his curiosity piqued. He peppered me with questions about Earth's history, culture, and tech. I obliged, sharing stories over cups of replicated coffee. The kid was sharp, I'd give him that. Weeks later, during a hands-on lesson in the bowels of a mock starship, disaster struck. An ear-splitting boom rattled the room as a plasma conduit ruptured, spewing scorching flames. Screams filled the air as shrapnel sliced through scales and skin alike. The exits were blocked, trapping us inside the smoke-choked chamber. I snapped into action, barking orders at the shell-shocked students. Varys, Torak, grab those metal sheets. Brace them against the bulkhead to block the fire. Coughing and sputtering, we erected a makeshift barricade, huddled behind it as the inferno raged. Varys crouched beside me, eyes wide with fear and a newfound glimmer of respect. He watched intently as I jury-rigged a distress beacon, fingers flying over the mangled components. "Emergency teams will be here soon," I assured him, clapping a soot-stained hand on his shoulder. "We just gotta sit tight and trust in some good old-fashioned human grit." As the minutes crawled by, Varys studied me, his brow furrowed in thought. "I always believed humans were weak," he mused, "but the way you stayed calm, took charge. Maybe we were wrong." Before I could respond, the doors hissed open, revealing a squad of Cardassian emergency personnel. They hauled us out of the ruined classroom, tending to the wounded. Amidst the chaos, Varys caught my eye, an unspoken understanding passing between us. In that moment, I knew I'd planted a seed of doubt in his mind, a crack in the foundation of lies the Cardassians had built. It was a small victory, but I'd take it. Rome wasn't built in a day, and unraveling centuries of prejudice would be a long, arduous road. But if I could change one stubborn Cardassian's perspective, then maybe, just maybe, there was hope for humanity yet. In the days following the classroom incident, Varys found himself spending more and more time with James, eager to learn about the human's unique perspective on life and technology. They shared meals in the Academy's cafeteria, swapping stories and debating the finer points of engineering. But as their friendship grew, so too did the whispers and sideways glances from Varys's fellow Cardassians. It all came to a head one evening when Ducat, a particularly zealous classmate, cornered Varys in the dormitory hallway. "What do you think you're doing, fraternizing with that human?" Ducat hissed, his eyes narrowing to slits. "Have you forgotten everything we've been taught about their kind?" Varys stood his ground, meeting Ducat's gaze evenly. "Maybe what we've been taught isn't the whole truth. James has shown me that humans are more than just primitive savages. They have knowledge and skills that could benefit Cardassia." Ducat scoffed, his scales rippling with barely contained disgust. "Benefit Cardassia? Don't be foolish, Varys. Humans are a threat to our way of life. Their very existence undermines the natural order of things. It's only a matter of time before they try to destroy us." There was something in Ducat's tone that gave Varys pause, a hint of something deeper and more insidious than mere prejudice. "What do you mean, destroy us? The humans have never shown any aggression towards Cardassia." Ducat leaned in close, his breath hot against Varys's neck. "Not yet, perhaps, but mark my words, Varys. If you continue down this path, you'll bring nothing but trouble upon yourself and our people." With that, Ducat turned on his heel and stalked away, leaving Varys alone with his thoughts. Varys knew he couldn't ignore Ducat's warning, but neither could he abandon his growing friendship with James. He needed answers, and he knew just where to start looking. The Academy's archives were a labyrinth of dimly lit corridors and dusty data nodes, but Varys was determined. He spent hours combing through old records and classified files, piecing together the fragments of a long-buried history. What he found shocked him to his core. Centuries ago, when humans first ventured into the stars, they had encountered the Cardassians on the fringes of their territory. The initial contact had been peaceful, but tensions quickly escalated as both sides vied for control of valuable resources. A series of skirmishes had broken out, culminating in a brutal conflict that lasted for decades. In the end, neither side emerged victorious. A tenuous peace was brokered, but the scars ran deep. The Cardassians, proud and unyielding, could not abide the thought of sharing the galaxy with a species they saw as inferior. And so a campaign of misinformation and propaganda was born, designed to paint humans as weak and primitive in the eyes of Cardassian society. But there was more. As Varys dug deeper, he stumbled upon evidence of a conspiracy within the Academy itself. Encrypted communications, deleted sensor logs, and altered maintenance records all pointed to one chilling conclusion. The explosion in James's classroom had been no accident. Someone had deliberately sabotaged the plasma conduit, hoping to discredit James and his teachings. But who would do such a thing, and why? Varys knew he needed to confront Ducat. He found his classmate in the Academy's training grounds, practicing hand-to-hand combat with a group of other students. Varys waited until they were alone before making his move. "I know about the conspiracy," Varys said, his voice low and steady. "The explosion in James' classroom, it was sabotage." Ducat's eyes widened for a fraction of a second before his features smoothed into a mask of calm indifference. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me, Ducat. I've seen the evidence. You're a part of this, aren't you? You and who else? The Academy leadership? The military?" Ducat's lips curled into a sneer. "You've always been too smart for your own good, Varys. Yes, I'm a part of it. We all are. And you should be too, if you had any sense of loyalty to your people." "Loyalty?" Varys spat. "You call this loyalty? Sabotaging the education of our own students, perpetuating lies and hatred against an entire species? This is madness, Ducat." "No, Varys, this is necessity. The humans are a cancer, a blight upon the galaxy. They must be contained by any means necessary, and if that means sacrificing a few Cardassian lives along the way, so be it." Varys reeled back, his mind spinning with the implications of Ducat's words. He had always known that the prejudice against humans ran deep within Cardassian society, but this was beyond anything he had ever imagined. He thought of James, of the countless hours they had spent together, learning and laughing and growing. James had shown him a different way of looking at the universe, a way based on curiosity and cooperation rather than fear and hatred. But now, armed with the terrible knowledge of his people's betrayal, Varys found himself at a crossroads. He could expose the conspiracy, reveal the truth about the sabotage and the lies that had been fed to generations of Cardassians. But doing so would mean turning his back on everything he had ever known, risking his own life and the lives of those he loved. Or he could remain silent, bury the truth and continue living the lie that had defined his entire existence. It would be the safer path, the easier path. But could he live with himself, knowing what he knew? Varys looked at Dukat, at the cold, hard glint in his eyes, and knew that he had already made his decision. He just hoped that he would have the strength to see it through, no matter the cost. Varys took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest as he stood outside Gul Madred's office. He clutched the datapad containing the evidence of the conspiracy, his palms slick with sweat. He had to do this. He had to expose the truth, no matter the cost. He pressed the chime on the door, and it slid open with a soft hiss. Madred sat behind his desk, his features carved from stone. He looked up as Varys entered, his eyes narrowing. "Ah, Varys, to what do I owe this unexpected visit?" Varys stepped forward, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his gut. "Gul Madred, I have evidence of a conspiracy within the Academy, a conspiracy to sabotage James Rice's classes and discredit human knowledge." Madred leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "A bold accusation, Varys, and what evidence do you have to support this claim?" Varys handed over the datapad, his fingers trembling slightly. Madred took it, scrolling through the files with a practiced eye. Minutes ticked by in silence, the only sound the soft beeping of the pad. Finally, Madred looked up, his gaze piercing. "This proves nothing, Varys. These files could easily have been fabricated." Varys blinked, taken aback. But the sensor logs, the maintenance records, are easily altered by someone with the right skills and motivation," Madred interrupted, his tone cold. "Tell me, Varys, how long have you been working with James Rice?" Varys stared at him, confusion swirling in his mind. "Working with him? I'm not working with him. I'm his student." Madred leaned forward, his voice low and menacing. "Or perhaps you're something more, a human spy sent to infiltrate our academy and sow discord among our people." Varys reeled back as if struck, his mouth hanging open in shock. "What? No, that's insane." "Is it?" Madred pressed, his eyes glinting. "You've been spending an awful lot of time with this human, learning his ways, absorbing his ideas. How do I know you haven't been turned against your own kind?" Varys shook his head, his thoughts spinning. Could James really be a spy? Could everything he'd learned, everything he'd come to believe, be a lie? I don't know what to think anymore," Varys whispered, his voice cracking. Madred leaned back, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I think it's best if you take some time to reflect on your loyalties, Varys." Dismissed. Varys stumbled out of the office, his mind whirling. He barely registered the group of students blocking his path until he nearly ran into them. Dukat stood at the front, his arms crossed over his chest. Well, the human lover returns." Varys flinched at the venom in Dukat's voice. The other students glared at him, their faces twisted with disgust. "It's time to choose, Varys," Dukat spat. "Cardassia or the humans, you can't have it both ways." Varys looked from one hostile face to another, panic rising in his throat. He shoved past them, breaking into a run. He didn't stop until he reached the Academy's library, his lungs burning and his eyes stinging with unshed tears. He slumped against a bookshelf, his body shaking with silent sobs. Everything he'd believed, everything he'd fought for, had been turned on its head. He didn't know what to think anymore. As he sat there, lost in despair, a glint of light caught his eye. It was coming from a dusty old tome tucked away on a high shelf. Varys reached for it, his curiosity momentarily overriding his distress. The book was ancient, its pages brittle and yellowed with age. As Varys flipped through it, his eyes widened in shock. It spoke of a time long ago when Cardassians and humans had been allies, working together to explore the stars. But something had happened, some great divide that had torn the two species apart. The book hinted at a hidden truth buried deep within the Academy's archives. Varys closed the book, his heart racing. He knew what he had to do. He had to find those archives, had to uncover the real story behind the human-Cardassian conflict. He slipped the book into his bag and headed for the door, his steps determined. He didn't know what he would find or what dangers he would face, but one thing was certain. The truth was out there, and he would stop at nothing to find it. Varys's heart raced as he and James crept through the Academy's darkened corridors, their footsteps echoing off the cold metal walls. They had spent days poring over ancient maps and schematics, piecing together the location of the hidden archives. Now, as they stood before the massive blast doors, Varys hesitated, his hand hovering over the access panel. "Are you sure about this?" he whispered, his voice thick with tension. "If we're caught—" James placed a reassuring hand on Varys's shoulder. "We have to do this, Varys. The truth has been buried for too long." With a deep breath, Varys punched in the access code, his fingers trembling. The doors hissed open, revealing a cavernous room filled with towering data stacks and flickering holographic displays. They worked quickly, their eyes scanning the rows of data nodes for any mention of the human-Cardassian conflict. Hours passed, the only sound the hum of ancient machinery and the frantic tapping of their fingers on the consoles. And then they found it, a single file buried deep within the archives, its encryption so complex that it took James' expert skills to crack. As the file unfurled before them, Varys felt his world shatter. The Cardassian-human conflict had not been a stalemate, but a decisive human victory. The Cardassians, their pride wounded, had rewritten history, erasing any mention of their defeat and propagating the lie of their own superiority. But that was not all. The archives revealed a conspiracy that went far beyond the Academy, reaching into the highest echelons of Cardassian government. For decades, they had been manipulating the educational system, using schools like the Academy to breed a new generation of Cardassians, ones filled with hatred and mistrust towards humans. Varys felt sick, his stomach churning with a mixture of anger and betrayal. How could his own people have lied to him, to all of them, for so long? He turned to James, his eyes blazing with determination. "We have to confront them. Madred, the other conspirators. We have to make them answer for what they've done." James nodded grimly, his jaw set. They downloaded the files onto a secure data rod and slipped out of the archives, their hearts heavy with the weight of the truth. They found Madred in his office, surrounded by a cadre of loyal followers. Varys stepped forward, the data rod clutched in his hand. "It's over, Madred," he said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through his veins. "We know the truth about the human-Cardassian conflict, about the conspiracy to hide it." Madred's eyes narrowed, his scales rippling with barely contained rage. "You know nothing, boy. You've been poisoned by this human's lies." "No," Varys shot back, holding up the data rod. "The only lies here are the ones you've been telling us all along." Madred's followers shifted uneasily, their hands drifting towards their weapons. James stepped forward, his stance defensive. "Why?" he demanded, his voice raw with anger. "Why go to such lengths to hide the truth?" Madred sneered, his eyes glinting with malice. "Because the truth is a weapon, human, one that we will use to crush your pathetic species once and for all." He turned to his followers, his voice rising to a shout. The Academy was just the beginning, a breeding ground for a new generation of Cardassian warriors, ones who will stop at nothing to see humanity wiped from the face of the galaxy. Varys reeled back, his mind spinning with the implications of Madred's words. All this time he had been nothing more than a pawn in a game of galactic domination. But before he could respond, a figure stepped out from behind Madred's followers, his face twisted with disgust. "No," Dukat said, his voice ringing with conviction. "This ends now." Madred whirled on him, his eyes wide with shock. "Dukat, what are you doing?" "That I should have done a long time ago," Dukat spat. "I'm putting an end to this madness." He turned to Varys and James, his expression grim. "I'm sorry, Varys. I should have told you the truth from the beginning, but I was a coward, too afraid to stand up to the likes of Madred." Varys stared at him, his mind reeling. Dukat, his tormentor, his enemy, was on their side. But there was no time for questions. Madred let out a roar of rage, his hand scrabbling for his weapon. In an instant, the room erupted into chaos. Varys, James, and Dukat fought side by side, their movements a blur of desperate action. Disruptor blasts sizzled through the air, the stench of ozone and burnt flesh filling the room. And then a cry of pain. James stumbled back, his hand clutching at his chest. Varys watched in horror as he crumpled to the ground, his eyes glazing over. "No!" he screamed, dropping to his knees beside his fallen friend. "James, stay with me!" But it was too late. James's breath rattled in his chest, his eyes fluttering closed. With his last ounce of strength, he gripped Varys's hand, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Don't let them win, Varys. You have to tell the truth. You have to make them see." And then he was gone, his hand going limp in Varys's grasp. Varys let out a howl of anguish, tears streaming down his face. But there was no time to mourn. Madred and his followers were closing in, their weapons trained on Varys and Dukat. With a final defiant roar, Varys surged to his feet, the data rod clutched in his hand. He would not let James's sacrifice be in vain. He would expose the truth, no matter the cost. The battle raged on, the sounds of combat echoing through the halls of the academy, but in the end it was Varys and Dukat who emerged victorious, their enemies lying broken at their feet. In the days that followed, Varys broadcast the contents of the data rod across every frequency, every channel. The truth of the Cardassian-human conflict, the depths of the conspiracy, all of it laid bare for the world to see. The revelation sent shockwaves through Cardassian society, sparking protests and riots in the streets. The government, weakened by the exposure of their lies, crumbled, giving way to a new order, one based on transparency and cooperation with other species. But for Varys the victory was bittersweet. He had lost his closest friend, his mentor, and now he found himself an outcast among his own people, reviled for his role in exposing their darkest secrets. But he would not be deterred. With Dukat by his side, he set out to continue James's work, to build bridges between Cardassians and humans, to forge a new path forward. It would not be easy. There were still those who clung to the old ways, who saw Varys as a traitor to his kind. But he would not rest until the galaxy knew the truth, until the sacrifices of those like James were honored and remembered. And so, with a heavy heart and a steely resolve, Varys embarked on his new mission, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For he knew that the only way to truly honor James's memory was to keep fighting, to keep pushing for a better tomorrow, no matter the cost. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.